Hello and welcome back to Death and Taxes, the live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and I am joined, as always, by Gene Tunny. Gene, how are you?
G'day, John. I'm going well. World War III hasn't broken out yet, so I'm thankful for that. But yes, I mean, the global situation is obviously causing some anxiety out there. So I think we'll have to talk about that later. This stream.
Yes, indeed. Although, look, I don't think this is World War III, but realistically, when World War I started, in those first weeks, no one thought it was World War I.
Yeah.
When World War II started, in those first weeks, indeed, in that first year of the phony war, no one thought it was World War II. So if this is this could be World War III, and we just wouldn't know it yet. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. So, putting that out there, but we wouldn't know at this point, realistically. So we'll see. Those words could come back to bite you, Gene. They could come back to bite you.
Very true. Very true.
So we put this together every Thursday at 7:30 Queensland time, 8:30 for you Southerners. And we do it to talk about the political and economic issues of the day. This is simulcast on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Please, if you're following us there, give it a like, give it a share, go find us on the other platforms. And particularly, could I ask, if you're watching this now, please go and find us on Substack. Find us on Substack. It's one email per week, so we do not spam you. It's one relatively short newsletter, which often informs the topics that we talk about on this live stream. So it'd be great to have you following us on Substack. So I look forward to seeing you there. As Gene said, we're going to dive into the Iran war. How could you not, given everything that's been going on? And then we're also going to talk about the national accounts. This is a big week, right? So a big week of stuff to talk about. The national accounts have come out. So that's the latest economic data that shows the economy is going forward. It might not feel like it. There's a reason for that. We'll get to that soon. And the topic of the newsletter this week was CANZUK, which is a terrible name to describe an interesting idea. The idea of a closer sort of economic, social, cultural alliance between Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK, basically the Anglosphere except for America. So we will dive into that at the end as well. So that's what we've got in front of us. If you have, as we speak, any questions or comments, please feel free to write them in as we go. If it's a relevant comment as we're talking, like this one, hi, g'day, Lyndon, then we can show it. Otherwise, if there's good questions, we'll try to save them up for the end and dive into your questions then at the end. And if you want, you can go back and forth with us, answering us at that time as well. So please do write in questions, comments, criticisms, and any sort of tomatoes you want to throw at, especially at Gene, but you can throw them at me too. So that's what we've got in front of us. But the first things first, we start with the first bit of substance we've got is Gene's roundup of the economy, because if you're a normal person, you're not watching this stuff that closely, but it's the sort of stuff you should know. So thankfully, neither Gene nor I are that normal. We follow this stuff. Gene follows it very closely and puts it together with nice graphs for you so that you can ignore it for the rest of the week. Come here and in 10 minutes, learn everything you need to know about the state of the economy. So, Gene, no pressure, but what have we all missed for the last week?
Well, we may not have missed it, but broadly, the GDP number, so we had the national accounts come out on Wednesday. That was yesterday for the December quarter. Unfortunately, it takes 2 months for the ABS to prepare our national accounts. I mean, it'd be good to get it a bit quicker, but anyway, that's what we've got. Now, the number came in at 0.8% for the quarter, so that's a quarterly growth rate. And then if you looked at it over the whole year, so over 2025, it came in at 2.6%. Now, that's not exactly shooting the lights out, as they say, but it's a lot better than some economists expected, and it raises the threat, or it increases the risk that the Reserve Bank will be concerned that the economy is growing faster than its ability to keep up, or demand is growing faster than the ability of the economy to produce the goods and services, and therefore they're going to be more worried about inflationary pressure. So it was generally interpreted as increasing the risk of further interest rate increases this year. So, I mean, I think at least one more is very likely. So yeah, I mean, it could even be later this month, or more likely probably in May. So we'll wait and see on that one. What we see is that even the GDP per capita is starting to pick up. I mean, John, you and I have been very concerned about the per capita recession that we had, those 7 quarters of negative GDP per capita growth. So getting poorer in our living standards per person. So individually getting poorer because we had high inflation and we didn't have our incomes keeping up with the inflation. So yes, we're starting to see some recovery in that, but it's still we're still not really at the previous peak. We're still just a bit below where we have been. So we've still got some ground to make up. And if you look at an alternative measure which is a disposable income measure where they take into account things like interest payments on mortgages, then we're still well down on where we were. That's the blue line there. And so these figures just go to illustrate that even though the economy may be growing, we've still got this crisis, this cost of living crisis. There's still legitimate concerns about living standards. And this is driving a lot of the dissatisfaction we see in the community. This is driving support away from mainstream political parties and increasing support for one nation. So this is a big part of what's going on. So yes, in terms of productivity, we see that was actually flat during the quarter. So what that means is that the gains we saw in GDP essentially came from additional labour supply or additional workers, or additional hours worked rather than people becoming more productive. And so this is associated with the high population growth, high rate of immigration. We're not necessarily getting any more productivity. We're still down on where we were with productivity is roughly where it was toward the end of last decade. And yes, big challenge in terms of increasing our productivity. I think we all know that's something we bang on about a lot here, John. So yes, yesterday's national accounts, they were hotter than expected, but still the concerns about the fact that even though the economy may be growing, we're not really seeing the benefits. Those concerns continue. The big news, of course, over the last few days has been the invasion. Oh, not what do we call it? The attack, the strike on Iran. There's no. I mean, the US, I think it looks like there's a support for the Kurds, or if I've read that, or they're trying to promote a regime change. But so far, the Americans, they're not technically invading yet. They haven't got the boots on the ground, as they call it, from as far as I can tell. But they have launched those strikes in conjunction with Israel. And look, I mean, this has led to an increase in the oil price, as we'd expect. That's up around. It's up in the 80s, or it depends on which measure you use, but it has been above 80 US a barrel. It was toward the end of last month, it was in the low 70s. And then prior to that, so even earlier that month, it was in the 60s to 70s. So yes, significant increase in the price of oil, but still not as bad as it could be. There are concerns about that Strait of Hormuz being blocked. I mean, 20% of global oil supply being threatened. But so far, we haven't really seen the market. It hasn't reacted as badly as I initially thought it would. But still, that could, things can change, and that could, get a lot worse depending on, just how widespread this conflict is and just how many Gulf states are brought into it. So obviously watch this space. But so far, I mean, I've been surprised that it hasn't had a larger impact. In terms of the share market, I mean, our market's been more badly affected than the US, but we're down about 2.5% over the last 5 days. The S&P 500, which is the the pink line up the top. I've indexed both of these to 100 back in 2023. This is a previous chart just to illustrate just how frothy the American market's been, how much it's grown relative to ours. But they're down about 1% over the last week. We're down 2.6%. So again, I mean, the market seems to be, it certainly absorbed some of this news, and it sees risks with it, but we're still not it's not seeing it as necessarily catastrophic yet. So yes, of course, we just have to keep an eye on it and just see what happens if Trump can find an off ramp, if he can declare some sort of victory, and because he's taken out the Ayatollah, and then have an off ramp somehow, or he claims the victory, and we don't end up with this ongoing global, this regional conflict that risks bringing in China and Russia, which is the worst case scenario. So let's hope we will avoid that. Okay, John. So that's my roundup. Any thoughts or reactions on any of that?
Well, plenty to unpack. So we're going to talk about Iran soon. So I'll leave that for a few moments' time. We'll start.
I just thought I'd better qualify just something in the charts based on one of the comments I saw on the chat. I should qualify that the figures I had for per capita GDP, they were quarterly figures, so they were sort of in the order of $20,000, or of that sort of magnitude, or 25,000, and so you'd have to multiply by 4 to get the yearly figure. So just sort of should clarify that. But go ahead, John. Sorry.
Yeah, so we'll dive into the Iran war in a second. So starting on, I guess, the first stuff you mentioned with the national accounts. So I think, to be fair, if it was a negative GDP per capita number, we would be very bluntly pointing out that we're in a recession, or if there's at least 2 quarters in a row, we're in a recession, or at least that's what I would be saying, because I think that is the only number to look at when you're talking about a recession. If people are worried about recessions, they're worried about their quality of life, right? So GDP per capita is what matters, not total GDP. I think that's a ridiculous furphy when people try to say, oh, it's not a recession, GDP is going up if GDP per capita is going down. But anyway, the point is, if that was going down, we'd point it out. It's going up, so we have to point that out as well. This is not recession numbers. Having said that, realistically, the reason we have the rule that you need 2 quarters in a row is you need to observe some sort of amount of trend going on. So you don't want to overinterpret any one data point. So don't get too depressed about one negative number. Don't get too happy about one positive number. This is 0.4% growth in the quarter per capita. Let's wait and see what happens next quarter before we pop any champagne. Another reason not to get too excited. Of the total 0.8% increase, that's including population growth, of that total increase, fully half of it came from building up inventories. So that is, more stuff was produced, then it's good to produce more stuff, right? I'm a big fan of that. But if you're producing the wrong stuff and no one buys it, it can show up as building up inventories. But look, again, don't want to overinterpret that. It also could be building up inventories because they had a great sales last quarter. They sold their inventory stock low and they're rebuilding. So without more information, we don't want to overinterpret that. But it's not necessarily signs of gold and glitter. The other half nearly is almost all caused by growth in government spending. So private spending has gone backwards per capita, and there was basically no private investment outside of housing. Yeah. So there was private investment in dwellings and no private investment in non-dwelling construction, capital and equipment, or farm equipment or farm animals, right? So all of those went backwards. Those are worrying signs, right? Because long-term growth comes from capital investment, private capital investment. But all right, let's just wait and see, right? So there's something to be happy about. There's a few reasons to be worried, I would say, about those numbers, national accounts. But yeah, not officially a recession. So good news there. And yeah, as Gene says, it probably means interest rates are heading up. You were going to say?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good observation you made, John, unpacking those GDP numbers, because too often we, that's not covered in the commentary. You just look at that headline number. So I think that's good to do. This point about the low level of investment, Alex Robson brought this up at his seminar at Griffith today. He did an APEC study centre seminar that I went to, and this is partly, this is one of the motivations for why Alex has this idea of the cash flow tax. They've got that. We've talked about their tax proposal, and it's obviously not a perfect proposal because of how they've designed it, and it's this hybrid sort of. They've still got the existing company tax system. But yeah, that was a point Alex made about how if we're going to have productivity, we need to have the investment, because so often the productivity change is embodied within the capital equipment, isn't it? Within the investment.
Yeah, I think too many economists get themselves tied in knots with endogenous growth theory, and they're finding weird and wacky variables that can correlate with the all-important A in those equations. I think that if you keep scratching at the data, you'll find an unavoidably large correlation between just private capital investment and the growth rate. And I know the theory tells us that that's supposed to diminish and then you have to go and do something else. I suspect that vibrant investment in private capital leading to competition is often what drives the innovation. And so you get both the capital growth and that magical multi-factor productivity out of the private capital investment. But for whatever reason, it keeps showing up as the driver of growth. So let's not overthink it. Economists kind of get ahead in academia to overthink things that don't need to be overthought, put in very fancy formulas that no one understands, run through a bunch of data that probably isn't appropriate for their study anyway, and then trick a bunch of people that it matters, but only 4 people ever read it. So that's often the way they then come out and say, look, there's a really complicated cause of productivity growth. No, just private investment is the core of it, and competition that private sector competition. If you got those two things, you will get your productivity growth. And you spoke to Alex then at this event. Did you raise the issue of the cash flow tax and our ever so gentle criticism on our previous shows, Jim?
Oh, I think he's aware of it. He acknowledged that they've been getting criticised by lots of different commentators. So yeah, he understands that. Yes. Well, I mean, it would be good to have him on the show, but I think Alex probably prefers to do those type of events, economic society events, rather than come on our show. But anyway, yeah, we're always open. We'd love to have Alex on the show.
Yep, open invite. So that's the national accounts part of the story. Then you had the Iran war. So let's use that, shall we, as the springboard, as the segue. So that's the economic part of the show. Then we move on to the politics news of the day, and there's one pretty obvious piece of politics news that has come out of the last week, and that is, as you said, the US and Israel has attacked Iran. And I think you were saying, is it a war? Is it an attacking it? Is it something else?
Well, is it an invasion? I initially called it an invasion, but it's not necessarily an invasion yet, is it? But it is definitely a war or an attack or a strike. Yep, yeah. Sorry.
Right. No, you had a good reason to pick yourself up there, but it did. In that context, this comment from Peter Shanks amused me. Soon we're going to call it a special military operation. This is also in the US, I believe Trump's not supposed to call it a war, because if he calls it a war, then he's supposed to get congressional approval. So, of course, it's not a war. It's like a schmore or a blore or something that rhymes with war. And then he doesn't need congressional approval, because that's apparently the way constitutions work. But that then is reminiscent of the fact that the Russians also don't call their invasion of the Ukraine a war. It's a special military operation, or SMO, as Peter said here. And in the West, we mocked the Russians for that. And now America is doing the same. So, yeah, I found that comment amusing. Look, I'll just say there's lots to unpack about the Iran war, but one quick comment on something you said just before. I am very skeptical that this is a good idea. I think it's going to, I don't think it was a wise decision. But I want to say, I don't see much evidence that there's any real risk of Russia or China getting involved here. That's why I don't think this is going to be World War III, right? So basically, if it doesn't drag China in, it won't be World War III, in my opinion. And I can't see how this drags China in. I mean, if you have, I'd be very open to hearing the ideas, the theories, but I can't see the rationale for China getting involved in this war. Therefore, I can't see this being World War III. I see this as being an ongoing regional headache for quite a while. But what is your take on that, Gene? Do you have an insight on the possibility of China or Russia stepping over the line?
I think probably the greatest risk is from China, simply because, I mean, from what I understand, they import a significant amount of energy from Iran, don't they? Or they've actually got a trading relationship with Iran. So, I mean, what I'd be concerned about is, I mean, depends on how the US plays it. If the US does actually get boots on the ground and actually has some influence over the administration, and then does threaten Chinese investments or interests in that country, then potentially there could be conflict there. But yeah, perhaps it's later down the track. So I think that's probably where the risk comes from. I mean, maybe Russia would be concerned if America also, established itself. I mean, I think it depends on how this plays out. If you're back to a situation pre-1979 where you have someone like the Shah who was very closely allied with the United States, then perhaps that could be destabilizing, and there's a risk of Russia and upsetting or the US getting into conflict with China and Russia over some incident we can't foresee at the moment.
Yeah, I don't doubt that China and Russia aren't happy about this situation and that they're hoping that Iran doesn't fall. But I just cannot see how they balance their benefits and costs and decide that fighting America now is in their interest. The only possible exception is if America is so weakened in a drawn-out conflict that China just licks their lips and looks at Taiwan and says, all right, America's distracted, we can take that now. And apparently China's not ready for that yet. Who knows what China's ready for? We don't know their internal machinations of their military readiness. But short of China deciding they want to take Taiwan, I don't think China or Russia are going to spend their military, political, or economic capital defending Iran. It's just the risk would be too high for them there, in my opinion, in my sort of humble opinion. So the fact that the prices haven't changed, but look, I think it's going to be gas prices to keep an eye on more than oil prices. But even then, it's 20% of the globe's trade, the fossil fuel trade goes through the Straits of Hormuz. That's been cut back. The US will try to open it up, but even if it is cut back, they will be able to find workarounds. The world will be able to increase production elsewhere. It will be costly. It's not cost-free. It won't be pleasant, but I don't think it's a disaster, right? So I think the war was a mistake. So I'm not trying to say, oh, look, everything's fine, everything's rosy, but I also don't want to exaggerate the drama and say the world's ending, World War III is coming, China's getting involved, we won't be able to buy groceries. Look, I think the costs are going to mount slowly and steadily and far exceed any possibility of benefits. And me being like an Aspie economist, I'm sitting here with a spreadsheet, and the decision, in my opinion, comes down to, do the benefits exceed the costs, which I know makes me sound very dry and very boring. But honestly, when it comes to public policy, how can the question be anything else, right? If the government does something, should they do it? Well, do the benefits exceed the costs? All right, it might be worth doing. Wait, do the costs exceed the benefit? Well, no, then the government shouldn't do it. I mean, I think it's so painfully self-evident, but when I say it, people roll their eyes and accuse me of being too much of a nerd. But look, I don't think it'll pass that litmus test, but I don't think it's going to be a disaster for Australia, especially if we don't get involved. But tell me, Gene, what is your take? This takes us a bit away from economics, but I've been very interested following the war news. What is your take on the rationale for this war? I mean, I've already put my cards on the table. I've said I don't think it was a good idea. is there a way that you can squint and look at it sideways and think this could be justified or this could be beneficial? Or I mean, I was hoping we'd have a good argument here and you'd come in here as a war hawk. But feel free to tell me what you actually think.
I mean, it may well be justifiable, but they haven't justified it. So, I mean, there's no real evidence. I mean, we've just got to take their word for it that Iran was close to developing a nuclear weapon. I mean, no doubt they've been trying to develop one. I don't doubt that. But, I mean, honestly, I mean, this is wag the dog, isn't it? This is Operation Epstein Fury. This is to distract from the Epstein files. Donald Trump, however many years ago in 2012, said that Obama was going to do the same thing. He was going to attack Iran to distract from some domestic political crisis. I mean, it's hard to see what's happening as anything other than that. And I mean, Israel perhaps has taken, they've seen that Trump would be open to this because of the domestic political situation. And Netanyahu sees, oh, well, I've been wanting to do this for 30 or 40 years. So why not? I've got a great opportunity to get the US on side. And look, I mean, Marco Rubio and who else? I mean, Lindsey Graham, they've been struggling to explain this. And they came up with some very bizarre explanation the other day that Trump ended up having to slap down and say, hang on, no, they didn't really mean that. I mean, their explanation was, well, we knew that Israel was going to attack Iran, and if Israel attacked Iran, Iran would attack us, so we should attack first. So, I mean, and then Trump had the wisdom to realize, well, actually, that makes me look weak. That makes me look subservient to Netanyahu, which it did. So then he's been trying to walk that back. But yeah, honestly, John, I can't see any legitimate or any, I mean, maybe I can see a rationale, but I don't think the Americans have proved it at this stage. This looks to me like a classic wag the dog maneuver. Yeah,
look, I often doubt the official reasons that they give us, right? That America's suddenly become a humanitarian government that wants to save the protesters in Iran. I find that very difficult to take seriously. And look, I think the idea that Iran was close to a nuclear weapon also at this stage was quite frankly absurd. And look, I don't think anyone who pays attention actually believes it. The trick is, of course, there's lots of people who don't pay close attention. And for those people, you can tell them these things. And seriously, if you're a normal person, you're probably not going to research it. And if someone you kind of trust tells you, then you could just nod and smile. That's a good reason. They got nuclear weapons and they're killing their people. But I think it's something else. Who knows what it is? Clearly, Israel has wanted to do this for a long time. They see Iran as a geopolitical competitor for sort of regional hegemony in that area. And they've been wanting to knock Iran down a couple of sizes for a long time. And for some reason, Trump has decided to go along with it. But even if what they're saying is their official reasons are bullshit, I find the best way to go about it is still to take the reasons they say at face value. And try to go through it. And I think that the main reason they're saying is they've got nukes, or they, not that they got nukes, that they could get nukes. And what I find bizarre about that argument is there was already an agreement that prevented them getting nuclear weapons. And Trump proactively canceled the agreement. And it was only after Trump canceled the agreement that Iran increased enrichment. And at the time they said, and we'll take enrichment back down to 4% or whatever it was, if you go back into the agreement. So if the concern was actually nuclear weapons, there was a solution on the table. And I think that would be the path forward, is you go back to Iran and say, the problem with the old JCPOA, acronyms, they got to love their acronyms. That was the nature of the name of the acronym for the agreement that Iran, the US, and Europe had, the JCPOA. And the legitimate problem with it was that it expired. So the obvious solution is you go back to Iran and say, we need to extend it. And I'm pretty sure that could have been done. I mean, at least it should have been attempted. And I'm pretty sure it could have been done. And then we would have been able to put that nuclear weapon fear to the side and address the next rationale, whatever that rationale was going to be. But look, the other part of this, of course, is the cost calculation. And Trump has shown with the Venezuela incident, whatever you want to call that, kidnapping Maduro, that he can sometimes pursue military projects with relatively low costs. In which case, if he can pursue a military project with a pretty low cost, he only has to establish a pretty low benefit, right? So, pushing out Iran's nuclear possibility from 5 years to 6 years is a pretty low benefit. But if the cost is even lower, it could pass, as I say before, my very nerdy benefit cost test. So that's what we're looking at the moment. That's what everyone is sort of pontificating about and gazing into their crystal ball. How costly is this war going to be? I don't think it'll be too costly to you and I, although I hope everyone at home is, stocking up on a bit of petrol, gold, and ammunition, like you all should. Only half joking. But it's going to be quite costly, I think, to America and that region as well. I think the Gulf states are going to bear a big part of the cost here. And I feel a bit bad for them because I'm not sure. They don't seem like they're being particularly bad actors in this, but they are really copying it. By the way, I find it quite interesting to see that in the last year, Qatar they're often trying to position themselves as the middleman, the broker. They have no opinion so that everyone can talk to them, sort of player in the region. And they've managed to be bombed by both Israel and Iran in the last 12 months. So that's the diplomacy does not always pay off for the poor old Qataris.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's going to be a bit costly for them. But I think the big question here is if the US genuinely does want to fully stop a nuclear program, and now they say also they want to prevent Iran having ballistic missiles, which seems like it's only intended to try and make Iran defenseless. So but anyway, put that aside. That can only be achieved through regime change, right? So consider this: if they decide that they will declare a ceasefire and they will go home, but the regime's there, they can just start rebuilding their ballistic missile stockpile and rebuilding their uranium enrichment facilities.
Yeah.
And then you can bomb them again, but without a regime change, they can just start doing that again.
Haven't the Israelis assassinated the senior Iranian nuclear scientists? I mean, they seem to be very good at that. I mean,
they had a campaign of doing that during from about 2010 to 2021. They had semi-regularly put car bombs in scientist cars and what have you. But during that time, Iran kept increasing their enrichment anyway.
Right. Okay.
So it seemed like it didn't seem like it prevented it. I mean, also these scientists that are doing this, they're writing down what they do, and the next scientist knows how to read. So I mean, you're going to have to kill a hell of a lot of scientists if there is institutional knowledge. So I don't think they have stopped the institutional knowledge. And also, look, most of those assassinations happened before the main breakthrough of Iranian nuclear technology, which was after the US pulled out of the JCPOA. Iran went from 4% enrichment, which is what you need for nuclear power, right, which is a normal thing to do. And then step by step, they went up to 60% enrichment, which there's no reason to have 60% enrichment. Like there's literally no reason. It's not like there's no civil reason. There's no military reason too. There's literally no reason, right? You need about 90% to make a bomb. You need about 4% to run a power station. And there's a few medical things where you need about 20% for. But the reason they went to 60 then, I think pretty obviously, was to prove that they could, right? Because there is no actual reason to have 60% enriched uranium. You need 90 for the bomb. So, I think they showed they had the capacity, and I'd be surprised if they no longer had the capacity. So that means if US is serious about saying they want to fully stop a nuclear program or fully stop ballistic missiles, the internal logic there has to be regime change, I would have thought. If there's a ceasefire, look, I think the outcome will be a ceasefire. And so that just goes back to sort of raise the question about, well, what was the reason for this? But if we take it at face value, they need a regime change. And then how do you do that? I mean, that's the sort of $1 million question. The civilians in Iran don't have guns. The IRGC has a very deeply embedded network of, religiously fanatic loyalists. And now that we've knocked out their top brass, the next generation that's coming up seems to be very dedicated to fighting. So I mean, I'm open to suggestions. I mean, it's
well, aren't the Americans and the Israelis arming the Kurds? Aren't they supporting the Kurds who are in, parts of Iran and also in Iraq? And so, I mean, one of the ideas is that the Kurds will come in and they will, contribute to the I guess the chaos internally, and that will end up, contributing to the overthrow of the regime. I think that's what they're hoping for, or someone, students and who else? I mean, in 1979, it was a lot of students, wasn't it, and workers. I mean, it was a broad-based revolution. The problem was that the Islamists, the radical Islamists, got control of it ultimately. But I mean, I suppose that's what they probably want to see. They want to see the Kurds coming in, then they want to see domestic forces combining to overthrow the regime, like they did in, because there was a broad-based revolution originally in 1979. It just narrowed down, unfortunately, to the theocrats.
Yeah, the issue there is in 1979, it was big chunks of the military that switched teams.
Yeah.
Right. So the 1979 revolution wouldn't have worked without the mass defections of significant chunks of the military. And now we've got a situation where there is two parallel militaries in Iran. One official military, which is under-resourced, doesn't have money, doesn't have connections, but they are officially the military. And then you've got the IRGC, who has all the money. They're well embedded everywhere, all the networks and all the best hardware. And so even if you could flip the army, if the IRGC disagrees, they're probably going to win that fight. I mean, I guess the best case, what I assume they're hoping to do is flip the army, the normal army, the under-resourced army, which tends to have a bunch of conscripts, which means they're not joining out of fanatical zeal. So that would be probably your target market. Try to get the regular army in Iran to switch sides. Well, we haven't seen it yet. No one knows the future. That can be tricky. But from what I understand, the IRGC would win that fight against the regular army quite easily. So we'll see. That's one option. The other option, like you say, is the Kurdish insurgency. Now, that one's interesting in that that scenario has some analogies to a few other conflicts we've seen in recent history. One is the situation 2001 in Afghanistan. Now, the US effectively sort of defeated the Taliban, sort of defeated the Afghanistan government at the time, but it mostly wasn't US troops, right? You ended up with lots of US troops on the ground after that, and they were stuck there for a long time in a quagmire. But the actual most of that victory on the ground was done by what was called the Northern Alliance, which was a group in north of Afghanistan, Northern Alliance, which was made up mostly of ethnic minority Tajiks and Hazaras, which is the Pashtuns. So they're the biggest ethnic group in Afghanistan, and that was the Taliban. And then you had your Tajiks in the north, making up the Northern Alliance. And America then backed this ethnic minority, gave them air power, gave them better weapons, and then they came in and sort of beat the Pashtuns, the Taliban, in the south. And you can kind of see an analogy here to what maybe America's hoping to do in Iran. They've got an ethnic minority up in the northwest, which is the Kurds. They can provide them then air cover and better weapons, and they can hope that the Kurds come through and beat the Iranian government. Now that looks like that theory makes sense. Oh, by the way, the other analogy, 2011 Libya, the US provides I think it was air cover to the eastern tribes and the Berber tribes to come in and take over the Gaddafi tribes. But they didn't put their boots on the ground, but that also led to, an insurgency being backed by America, leading to the Libyan government collapsing. And in Syria as well, for about 7 years, they were giving weapons to Sunni insurgents, another ethnic, a religious minority in Syria, to fight against the government of the day. So you've got a few examples here. Everyone's pointing to Iraq, where the US put troops on the ground, but you've got Libya and Syria and Afghanistan, where they were kind of doing this, give them weapons, give them air cover, and hope that ethnic or religious minority that we're backing, or tribal minority, can come in and sweep the government away. A couple of problems with that theory. One is, if you look at the outcome in Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya, all of the outcomes were bad.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan, America spent trillions of dollars and lost hundreds of lives and killed many thousands more of people, including women and children, so that they could replace the Taliban with the Taliban. That was the outcome of that 20-year pointless investment of blood and treasure. In Syria, how long did that conflict go for? Over 10 years, 13 years in total?
Yeah.
To replace a secular dictator with what seems like an ex-Al-Qaeda dictator. So it's not clear that that's necessarily going to be a wonderful outcome. And Libya is still a broken country, right? A failed state following the Gaddafi getting gang raped to death. So none of these are a glowing endorsement of the strategy. But the other problem is the Kurds in northwest Iran, they don't want to control Iran. They want independence. Why would the 10% of Kurds in the northwest march on the rest of Iran? It wouldn't really make much sense, right? I mean, once they got independence, they would stay there. And all of the other people you would need to potentially overthrow the Iranian regime would be against Kurdish independence. So the Shah has come out against Kurdish independence, right? If the Shah were to come in and successfully take over Iran, the Kurdish independence fighters would keep fighting against the Shah. They wouldn't take his side, right? Because they're not there to conquer all of Iran. They're there to create Kurdistan, like carve out their own country. So it's the current theory people are talking about. You back the Kurds, that maybe they can help roll the Iranian government. I'm struggling to see the path from how you get from here to there with that path. It's again, as far as I can see, the options are you keep the US and Israel keeps backing enough of these insurgent groups, because there's also the Baloch people in the north, in the southeast of Iran, which is another ethnic minority group. They also want their own country. You've got a few other ethnic minorities that might get a bit grumpy. If you just decimate the country, or worse than decimate, because decimate's only 10%. If you really destroy the country, perhaps the center can lose the ability to control the regions, and Iran just breaks into who knows how many different sort of warlord factions.
Yeah.
So that is one possible scenario, and the US arming the Kurds could help contribute to that just breaking apart and the failed state scenario.
Yeah.
And that would kind of achieve Israel's goal of making sure they don't have a big competitor in the region. But it seems like that would be a pretty devastating outcome for the Iranian people. I mean, the idea that we're doing this for human rights seems pretty absurd if we're going to end up being happy with a failed state of a bunch of competing warlords. So that's not a pretty outcome. But that's one option. The other option is that the military does flip, and somehow they're able to actually win that fight against the IRGC. They invite back the Shah's kid, and they create a new secular country. So I guess that's what we're hoping for.
John, I mean, the demographics of Iran are favorable to the fall of this regime, aren't they? So Iran has a very, a relatively young population, or younger than many Western countries, and I think they've got. And there's a big diaspora network of Persians, of Iranians throughout the world. And I mean, the young people there know what, life is better in the West, or they know the problems with their regime. They just know just how oppressive it's been. So look, I imagine that, the young people, there's enough of them there that they could contribute to the overthrow of that theocracy.
Yeah, the issue isn't just young people, it's young people in the cities, right? So young people in the cities, and especially students, are particularly inclined towards preferring a secular government rather than the current sort of religious government. So that's very true. And they get grumpy sometimes and they protest sometimes, but they have no guns, right? And as I'm sure everyone in Australia, being good citizens and having dutifully nodded along as the mainstream media told you what to think, you all are convinced that it is a very good thing to disarm the population, because, if someone has a gun, they might shoot someone. But one of the consequences of that, and the whole reason the Second Amendment exists in America, is if you have a really tyrannical government, you want the people to be able to rise up against them. And of course, if you plan on having a tyrannical government, one of the first things you do, which is done in every tyrannical government, is you take away the people's guns. And that has been done in Iran. So there is just no organizing capacity for the students. There is that potentially that sort of the official or the mainstream army, but that really is quite a degraded force, right? So on paper, it's got lots of people, but all of the connections, the networks, the ability to actually control things, the money isn't with that force. But I mean, that's the theory, right? The theory is if you could flip that force, then they go and team up with the students, and they've got the zeal of the students with the coordination of the army. They beat the IRGC. So that's an option. I guess that's the dream option. The other option is that the IRGC, someone takes over from the IRGC, which is the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, something like that. And they just decide that the pragmatic thing to do is basically just surrender. They come in and say, look, I'll give you everything you want, America. Just leave me the dictator, and I will, here's the uranium, here's the ballistic missiles. So that would be a success. That's, I think, what Trump expected. Right? I think he said, like, I have a demand. I've shown I can blow up your country. So just sort of coup your leader, and you can stay the dictator as long as you give me what I want. Right? It was like the Venezuela model. He said before, he expected a Venezuela outcome. That doesn't seem very likely in the short term. Although if you extend this war out 3 or 4 years, I think that option starts to become very possible. Right? So over time, with the attrition where things keep getting worse, it does become more possible that eventually just an IRGC general that wants to escape this outcome and maybe just buy a mansion in the Bahamas eventually just takes the bribe and signs on the dotted line and takes the country with him, becomes the dictator. The other option, of course, is US troops on the ground. And the final option, other than the war just keeps going, which is also an option. The other option is that there's a face-saving compromise, which I think is the most likely outcome, right? So I think it's eventually both sides will realize, well, where do we go from here? Like, what are we waiting for? But what's actually going to happen? And they'll find some way to pretend a deal was done that was good for everyone, some cosmetic changes in Iran, and then Trump will declare victory and go home. And then 2 months later, Iran will probably restart their nuclear and ballistic missile program. And we'll be back here in a year or two's time to have this conversation again. But I mean, people listening at home, I'd be very interested to hear. If you're here live, please put in the chat, what scenario can you see happening? So not the, like, why did this happen or who's to blame, but literally what scenario? Imagine you want this to work. Explain to me how it works. I'd be very interested to see in the chat. Please write it in there. And if you're watching this later, if you're not watching it live, write it in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear what is the mechanism to get from here to there to achieve the goals that the US has set for themselves. Because at the moment, it's not clear to me. Of course, the other background issues here is, can Iran keep the Straits of Hormuz closed? Because that'll give us all in the world a bit of pain, but it'll give a lot of pain to the Gulf states. And the Gulf states are good allies with the US, and the more pain they're in, will they pressure the US to back off? How long can the UAE live like this? And the other question that I think has been answered now, but was quite an interesting question for a day or two, is which would last longer, the Iranian ability to shoot ballistic missiles or the American and Israeli ability to shoot them down? Because that was, for a while, the war of attrition.
Yeah.
And if Americans and the Israelis ran out first, then Iran was going to have carte blanche to just be able to destroy everything, right? Wipe off Tel Aviv from the map, destroy the desalination plants in the Gulf states, and basically just shut down. The UAE is closed. It's canceled. Saudi Arabia is canceled. Qatar is canceled. It does not exist, right? They would have to remove 90% of the population if they didn't have the desalination plants, because they would not have water. And if they lost their ability to intercept the missiles, then it would fundamentally reshape the Middle East. Now, I think we've seen what the answer is. The answer is that the Americans and the Israelis have been able to knock out the Iranian missile launches. It looks like Iran still has lots of missiles and no way to launch them. Now, that's my non-expert take on what has happened. You can tell me if you've got a different take on that, Gene. But so that means it doesn't look like there's any chance for Iran effectively winning. That was the Iran winning strategy, that the US and Israel ran out of interceptors, the Patriot and THAAD and Aegis systems. But it looks like America has won that part of the war. They've won the war of attrition on missiles, and now we're moving to the battle for Iran, which is all the stuff we've been talking about before. Gene?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't see them winning in the conventional way. So I agree with you there. I mean, I think there is the risk of that they will use their, proxies through the world so they can sponsor terrorism throughout the world. That's going to be a big risk. So we need to be, mindful of that over the coming years. But yeah, I think I agree with you. What it does show, I think, is just how risky it is living in that part of the world. I mean, people, there are a lot of Aussies in Dubai and a lot of Americans, a lot of wealthy, tax exiles. And I think they will be reconsidering that as a strategy living in that part of the world. It's incredibly risky. Then I think this has really brought it home.
Yes, indeed. And given they've kind of dine in on their good reputation, it could be quite disastrous for places like Dubai. There was something you said that I was going to respond to, but now I blanked on it. What did you just say before it's not
just about, I think Iran, there's a risk that Iran will
the terrorist
sponsor more terrorism through the world.
Well, that's going to be interesting because the vast majority of Islamic terrorism that we've seen in Europe, Americas, in the Bali bombing, etc., has come from Sunni radicals, right? Sunni radicals inspired by, I think, the Wahhabists or whatever. The people aligned with like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban, that clique. And of course, ISIS and Al-Qaeda hate each other as well, but that's because they're basically so similar. They both want to be the boss, but they're all sort of Sunni radicals. There has been very little Shia radical Muslim terrorism exported out to Europe and America and Australia and things like that. So it will be interesting now, because if there was ever an incentive for Iran to ramp it up, it would be now, presumably. So there's been a constant background debate where people say, oh, Iran's going to activate these sort of terror cells. And Iran responds with, but we've never done that. That's not us. That's the Sunnis. What are you talking about? And then everyone says, oh, no, but you're about to. You're about to. So it's going to be very interesting to see over the next couple of months, because one of two things will happen. Either the critics of Iran will be right. These terror cells have been lying in wait and they will start blowing up, in which case we should be worried. Or that never happens, in which case, does that mean the entire time they were telling the truth and we were just slurring them to justify how much we hate them? So I don't know the answer to that. The bombs could start going off tomorrow, right? They really could. I'm not promising that it won't, but we'll be able to find out. This is actually going to be, we'll be able to point and look and see the answer. I suspect the more interesting part of Iran's network isn't the sort of global terror cells, but their insurgency groups in Yemen and Iraq and Lebanon, which of course is Hezbollah and Iraqi Hezbollah. I don't know how to pronounce the word starting with K before Hezbollah. I'll call it Iraqi Hezbollah, and of course the Houthis. It seems like Iran is only willing to support insurgency groups that start with the letter H, because they also supported Hamas, which made little sense religiously, but it started with the letter H. So that's my theory. Now, it looks like to me that Hezbollah hasn't got much power left in Lebanon. The more interesting part will be if the Iraqi Hezbollah is able to spark off another mini conflict with the Kurds in Iraq or something like that. But I don't think that's going to fundamentally change the nature. I mean, it might distract the US or distract Israel, but I don't think that's where the rubber hits the road. That's not going to determine whether the US runs out of missile interceptors. That's not going to determine whether Iran can block the Straits of Hormuz, and it's not going to determine whether there's regime change. So it's it keeps the news ticking over if you're refreshing your web browser, but I don't think it's the core of the strategic issue that we're facing in the war. Anyway, I have ranted long enough about that. It's not the core of what we talk about, but as you might be able to tell, I have taken an interest in the topic. And yeah, I am skeptical that we're going to get value for money out of this war, if I can be so crude and crass as to frame it that way. So Australia should not be involved. There you go. That's definitely true. All right. Any other? So hard segue here. Hard segue. I don't know what to do to change the frame. Any other political news of the day, Gene, that's worth commenting on, other than the all-domineering war?
Oh, look, I think there's the ongoing issue with migration, and I've noticed that CIS, I'm an adjunct fellow there, so I don't mean to be critical of CIS, but there's a new paper out from CIS on housing and essentially trying to say, well, the issue is that we don't have a liberal enough planning regimes, which I think is right. I mean, I think we need to liberalise those regimes, not have as many restrictions, but it's been interpreted, that paper's been interpreted as CIS arguing that, well, we shouldn't blame immigration for the housing crisis. And I think it's just, it strikes me as incorrect. I mean, we should actually recognise the impact of high immigration and high population growth on the housing market. I think that's undeniable. So, and I've noticed a lot of commentary online and pushback against that paper by Marion Tupy. I mean, Marion's a good economist. I like Marion. I've had him on my podcast. I enjoy chatting with him. He's got his thesis of abundance. And I mean, look, he makes some good points. If we had less restrictive zoning laws, etc., then we probably wouldn't have the housing crisis that we've got at the moment. And look, fair enough. And maybe you could have a high rate of immigration and not have any impact. I mean, that's possible. I just think the numbers that we've had come into this country in the last few years have just been so large that regardless of how responsive your housing construction will be, I mean, there's always going to be time to build. I think we're always going to have issues. So I do see that is an issue. The fact that the supply side is not as responsive, not as elastic because of all of these restrictions, character housing, heritage laws. But at the same time, I think we can't say that immigration isn't part of the reason we've had these higher rents and higher housing costs. It just strikes me as a very strange argument to make.
Yeah, like the part of what they're saying is, of course, true. The part of the problem are these zoning laws and the regulations that slow down supply. So that part of the argument is true. It seems to me bizarre, though, to try and deny the fact that there is both supply and demand playing a role in this issue. And just technically, the only way that demand would be irrelevant is if supply was perfectly elastic. Right. So if supply was perfectly elastic, every time there's an extra person wanting a house, the result would be an extra house is built and sold for the exact same price as already exists. Right. That's basically what it means to have a perfectly elastic supply. Right. If there's more need, there's more produced, and it's done so quickly it doesn't change the price. And look, there are some goods out there that have that feature. I can't imagine what world we're in where they imagine that we're going to have a perfectly elastic supply of housing in Australia. I mean, I'm not even sure if that's technically possible, given that so many people want to live within an hour's drive of the capital cities. I'm not really sure how that could be done. So it seems weird to deny that. So I think two things could be done at the same time, right? We can accept the legitimacy of the demand side critique. Too many people coming in is going to put upward pressure on housing.
Yeah.
And at the same time say, but if we only focus on that, we're not really going to be able to fix the problem. You have to look at the supply side too. I don't know why this has become a debate between people. Either you look at supply or you look at demand. Why is that a debate, right? There's two curves there for a reason. We're allowed to look at both. Look at the other thing about.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I find it strange too. But look, I mean, it's got some. It looks like it's got some attention, and I mean, I think Marion makes a lot of good points about how, the abundance and how capitalism has led to a lot of, a huge increase in living standards over last, 150 years, or probably whenever we date the sort of pick up in living standards from. But yeah, that paper I found very strange, and I'd like to I'm hoping we can have a debate with Marion and some of people of that persuasion sometime. Maybe we'll try and get him on the show to have a chat about it.
Yeah, there's a few people at CIS that would probably be good to chat with about this. I think. Look, the other thing I haven't read Marion's paper, I should admit, but when it comes to discussions of regulation about the housing supply, and this is my bugbear, and it won't make sense to many of the non-economists, but so much of the discussion is we need to shift the supply curve out. Like, how can we shift the supply curve out? And I think that is the wrong question to be asking. If you're an economist, the question should be, how can we make the supply curve more elastic? Which is a very boring distinction for the non-economists. But for the economists amongst you, perhaps you could see the relevance of this. If you can shift that elasticity so that the line actually changes angle rather than just pushing the line out, but change the angle of the line, that allows you to absorb more changes in demand without the price changing too much. And it happens automatically. It doesn't involve a new political decision every time, a new decision by a premier to push through a few more developments. That would shift the supply curve out. But fundamentally changing the laws where, for example, if there is a development on the outer edge of a city, anyone who owns a block of land outside that development has automatic zoning approval. You don't need to apply, right? If you're the next block outside, you have automatic zoning approval. That would just change the elasticity, right? That would just happen automatically. And that's the sort of reform I think we should be really looking at if we wanted to help fix the supply side. And then that is not to say don't fix the demand side. I get that sometimes. I don't know if you get this from the angry Twitter mob. If you say anything about improving the supply side of housing, they'll shout at you and say, no, immigration. It's like, yes, that's important too. We can do both at once, right? There are two parts to the answer. But look, the other little piece of political/economic news is I saw from E61, which is a sort of economic-y political think tank, I think based out of Sydney. Good people there. Michael Brennan, I think, runs the place.
Yeah.
Another good economist. And they brought out a piece of research showing the gender pay gap. Of course, we've all heard before about the gender pay gap. I always want to use those. But they found out that, which is something that's been discovered in lots of other countries around the world, Western countries recently, it's gone negative, right? So women now are ahead in the gender pay gap, at least up to the age of about 30. Then it equalizes, and then above that, it goes back in men's favor. So that is something that is, I don't think, sufficiently well understood. It is a very logical outcome from the precursors, and that is that more women are going to university, more women are finishing university. And because of that, they're coming out of university and having lower unemployment and higher wages. None of that should be particularly shocking if you just look at the inputs and the outputs. I wonder, though, whether there's going to be the same campaign to fix that gender pay gap, or whether that's a gender pay gap that will just be accepted. But that's probably something that needs to be better known anyway. Gene, had you heard this?
I hadn't heard that. I'm going to have to look at the data. I know that women are graduating at higher rates from university in here in Australia, in the United States, I think in the UK too. So we would expect some sort of, this isn't surprising. That said, I do want to have a look at those figures just to make sure I understand them. And I wonder how much of it is part of this concern about young men. I think young men have certainly been, that there's a risk that many young men are being left behind, and they're particularly, they're sort of, they're drifting. And, this was part of, we saw this. And if you look at the States in particular, young men are more likely to be they vote Republican than young women who are Democrats. And I think part of it is they're frustrated, aren't they? Because they're not getting the jobs that they thought they'd get. Many of them are still living at home. They thought they might have, maybe they want to move out, but they can't afford it. They're playing video games. There seems to be a lot more young men who seem to be adrift in life than young women. We seem to now have a problem with young men. I remember what I was like as a teenager. I wasn't always, there were times when I wasn't pleasant, or I was sort of had, I didn't know what was going on in my head. So I know it's difficult for young men, and I think they've got it even more difficult than we had it when we were young.
Yes, there's a few things that I think fall out of this. Sorry, just scribbling notes to myself. there's a few things that I think fall out from this change in the relative education levels and the change in the relative income levels that are very uncomfortable to talk about. And so maybe the best thing to do is just not talk about them. But I've never been.
Oh no, dive in, John.
No, I was going to say I've never been very good at taking my own advice here. So, look, the awkward reality, and everyone wants to deny it because it's uncomfortable, but women prefer to date up. Right? There is there are some very uncomfortable data here. They did on dating sites, sort of matching rank how people are on a bell curve. And men ranked women, some are 2, some are 5, some are 8, some are 10, and it created a bell curve. And women ranked that sort of most men are 2s. And they've got different standards and requirements to be able to find someone they're willing to settle with. And most of them are looking for a man that in some way is higher up some sort of pecking order. Now, there's not just one pecking order in life. That's a very important thing to point out, right? It's not all just down to, do you have money? But that is one status thing. A job and an ability to excel at something, a higher education. Most women want to marry a guy. This is on the dating sites again. They say they'd want to date or marry someone with their education level or higher. Men never put that in. Women write down they want to date a man that earns as much money than them or higher. Men never put that in. Men are happy to date a woman with less education or with a lower income. And so you've just got this imbalance of what men and women want in a partner. And then when you have more women than men going to uni, but most women wanting a man that has at least their level of education, obviously you're going to have a problem there. I mean, it's just that the sorting is not going to work. And I'm not saying therefore ban women from university. We don't have to embrace the Taliban here. But we have to be aware that this is happening, right? It's pointless denying that it's happening. And the 2 consequences from that is just well, 3 consequences. One is the guys with actually high status now are ending up with like lots of women throwing themselves at them, because you've got this small number of very high status men that can now pick from dozens of women, and all of these dozens of women have so few of these high status men that they're all trying to get. So that imbalance is, I think, quite unhealthy. Those men are becoming assholes, and those women are often getting mistreated by those asshole men. And then you've also got the issue that these women are finding it harder to find a suitable partner to settle down with. Right? They've got a good education now. They got out their master's degree at the age of 24, and now they've gone on, and you have to work for at least, 7 or 8 years to justify the master's degree. And then by then you're in your early 30s, and then you're looking around, and all of these men kind of aren't up to your standards, which is a very common complaint from women in their 30s. These days when they're looking around, and it's going to delay the point when you settle down. And of course, the biological clock is still ticking. It's not me trying to be mean. Biological clock was invented before I said that sentence, right? So there's this delay in settling down, and therefore an increased number of people who are childless without that being their choice. Right, involuntary. That's what it's called. Involuntarily childless, as they say in the Birth Gap documentary. It's a good documentary. Everyone go and watch it. So you've got this increase, and that's contributing to the decrease in fertility rates around the world. So that's one, I think, quite important natural consequence coming out of this that we should just address head on. I don't know if they can do anything about it, but let's at least be honest about it as the first step. And the second logical consequence is that's going to have those asshole men at the top who have their pick of the women. It's going to create a lot of men in this underclass down the bottom who are just have been already told that, you're the bad guy in society. And then they're not going to uni, and then they're getting higher rates of unemployment and lower income, and they're still being told they're the bad guy. And then the women don't really want them because they're seen as being lower class. And so then you've got this big group of men competing for a relatively small group of low class women. That's not an ideal place to be in. A lot of those men are just sort of opting out, right? They're getting disillusioned and sort of tapping out of society and playing video games until they die, which is
this is the incel phenomenon, isn't it? This is the incel phenomenon that Nick Fuentes appeals to.
Yeah, and I don't think it's created by people like Nick Fuentes. I think it is a genuine thing that has been created by our modern society. And then when people see someone like Fuentes articulate it, they blame the person articulating it. But the relevant question is, is the underlying thing there? And I can't see how they could deny the underlying thing being there. We've got a status imbalance now between men and women, which wouldn't matter if women were happy to date down. But we haven't yet solved that. And sometimes this is suggested to me that that's the solution, right? Convince women to date down. Perhaps. I wonder to whether there's some degree of sort of biological evolution involved here, that we've got instinctive preferences for what we look for in a partner that may be innate. So I don't know, if they're not socially constructed, you can't socially deconstruct them. If they're biologically constructed, socially deconstructing them is going to be a pointless phenomenon, pointless attempt. And I think part of that as well is that I think men often get a lot of their sense of self-worth and self-esteem from being someone who has taken on responsibility and has respect that they have earned. Not just someone saying, oh, you're kind of useless, but I respect you anyway. Men want to feel you're respected because you deserve that respect, because you've actually done something useful, because you actually are taken on responsibility and achieved that, right? You've taken on a task that's difficult and done it. And if there are fewer places where men have an outlet to do that in a healthy way, I think a lot of those men are just going to end up a bit fucked in the head, to use a technical term, which is not a pleasant outcome. And I have no solutions for you here today, but it is a big issue, and it's worth taking it more seriously instead of just waving hands and saying, well, what, men are evil.
Well, is it an issue with the education system? So one of the things that's changed, certainly over the last, since I went to school, and there weren't really that many male teachers at school when I was there, but there were far more male teachers than there are now. I mean, I think the proportion of male teachers in schools has fallen because there are the concerns that, if I'm a male teacher in a primary school, everyone will think that I'm, up to no good, right? We know how people think. And I think this means that many young men, they lack the role models that they once had. So I think that's a big part of it, isn't it? Young men, they're sort of, maybe to some extent they're feeling, oh yes, I think it's a matter of lacking those strong male role models that they once had, and just maybe more and more are feeling adrift. I don't know to what extent it is. Some people will argue that it's because of the greater, because women have been getting ahead, and I don't think we should hold back women to improve the situation of men. I'm not sure that's the right way to do it, but certainly something's going wrong, and we need to have better. We need to, help those young men who are falling behind.
Yeah, my first thought when you said that was what RW said in this comment. If you want to talk about male role models, how about we keep the dads in the house?
Sure. Look, yeah, that's part of it too. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Look, I think there's part of that. I think the lack of the lack of men in the house. I think someone else wrote a comment here. I'll see if I find it. I think Helen Andrews really got onto this issue well. It's ironic to say this, but I think men had already said it before her. But because Helen is a woman, she's been able to say it, and people have listened, which is ironic.
She said it. She's very articulate. Yeah,
she's very articulate. Okay, so smart young woman. And of course, the wife of Tim Andrews, who was the founder of the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. So it's all connected wonderfully here. But she's made the point that a lot of the woke phenomenon has come from the feminine attitude starting to dominate in areas, and this attitude to prioritize caring over competency, sort of the male brutal hierarchy of get it done or piss off punk. Versus the woman's, oh no, is it? I didn't want to offend you here. Like, you actually did a great job. That's really good. Let me. And both of them have their roles, right? I don't mean to be throwing shade at the concept of caring, nor do I mean to be throwing shade at the concept of hierarchy. They both have their roles, which is probably why the male-female team, the family, has been the most successful institution in the history of existence in terms of allowing a species to propagate and function well in the world. So. Not throwing shade at both of those, but when industries that thrived under a more hierarchical structure suddenly get inundated with an overabundance of caring, sort of caring over competence as a priority order, those institutions can start collapsing. So the legal industry, the sort of HR industry, a lot of parts of our bureaucracy start to be feminized in their attitudes. And I think you've seen that in the family. You've seen that in education, right? Education now is entirely run according to feminine priorities in life. It's not, you fell over, get back up, it's fine, be tough, get out there and face the world in that play gym or whatever, the playground. And the same in the house, that the dad and the mum bring very different things. I mean, we see this in our house all the time, right? They slightly different instinct of, toughen up versus my wife running in to give him a cuddle. And the kids need both of those. I'm not saying women shouldn't dive in to give them a cuddle. Like kids need a mum in their life. But they kind of need a dad too, right? This is the well-balanced, well-rounded upbringing. Although, look, having said all that, I think all of that's true, but I think all of it's a slight distraction from the issue of that E61 pointed us at, and that is, I'm not saying women should be stopped from having education or a good career, but I do think to some degree this may be insoluble if men get their self-worth from taking on the responsibility of I have to work harder to protect and feed and successfully protect and sustain a family of people dependent on me, and I've worked hard and I've got nothing from it, and I have successfully helped other people. I think that is what is. I think men have evolved to feel a great sense of self-worth when they achieve that. And if there is a huge cohort of men unable to achieve that, I'm not sure that giving those men extra cuddles or extra punches in the arm or a good role model is necessarily going to give them a hell of a lot of extra life meaning. And I have no easy solution to that. I mean, part of the solution is there is more than one hierarchy, right? So that's an important thing, right? So if you can't be at the top of one hierarchy, be at the top of another, right? If there's more than one group of people that you can go out and protect and sustain, right? I think the sense of self-worth and pride people get from joining the military comes from this same instinct. So there you go. That's one outlet. You could go and successfully run a large corporation, sort of run a large organization, run a large charity. I mean, there's become a monk or a priest, right? There's lots of ways you can go out and add this value to the world. But I feel like one element that a lot of common men have previously used to add this value to their life, and that is being able to protect and look after their family, is harder to get for these undereducated men these days. And relatively speaking, men are less educated. So I don't know, in the comments, if you have a solution, Lyndon has a solution. I don't think that is going to be the one that ends up making us happier. Have you heard of this acronym, Gene?
Yeah, a friend of mine's adopted it. I mean, I first learned of it from them because they had a bad divorce. And, divorce is just, it's just devastating, or separation. And yeah, men can often end up, I guess it's bad for women too, but yeah, just a friend of mine who's gone through it was really devastated and ended up using this abbreviation. And so I learned about it through him.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the complaints about the status quo that the MGTOW people say have an element of truth to them. I would like to think their solution is the wrong one, because there's got to be a better end point than the battle of the sexes just ending with us going our own direction, our own way. I don't have the solution though. So, when I say I disagree with the MGTOWs, I'm not doing it from a position of scorn or superiority. I don't know the solution, but I hope there is a solution that's better than that.
But what's interesting is, not just, we don't need to go full, MGTOW, and men going their own way. But I think we do need to, perhaps men do need to have greater, they do need to have a wider social network, or I think it's important to have male friends, and, that's like the men's shed or whatever, or the club, as it once was, working men's clubs in the UK, or, RSL here in Australia, or members clubs here. I think it's important to have that, and to have a wide social network. And I think that does help overcome any, the feelings, depression or anxiety that you might get. I think that's what we need. And I think maybe a lot of men, they lack that. So the incels, or the young men who are struggling, yeah, they just need to broaden their social circle. They essentially need to get out of the house, really. And yeah, but it's if people are in that bad situation, me telling them that's not really going to help them, is it? But that's broadly what has to happen.
I agree with getting out of the house, because you're going to struggle to achieve things.
Yeah,
and have the human connection out of the house. Although I got to say, the idea that what men need is just to get together and be heard and talk and be in a community where they can be cared for and hugged is a very feminine response to what I think is a male problem. I think that would be the right solution. If women are depressed, they need a counselor, they need a community, they need a hug, they need someone to listen to them. I'm not sure if men can feel better until they actually have earned respect, not being given respect for free, earned respect.
Yeah, look, I agree with you there. I was not saying that they need to get together and share their feelings, but they need to get together and feel a sense of community. And this is what clubs like Tattersalls were about historically, right? So friendship above all, the idea of strong male friendships. And there's a line in, it's one of Zola's novels about just how, male relationships can end up being stronger, the strongest type of relationships between men who can, bond as brothers and, really get to understand each other on that level. So, often stronger than...
I agree. Yeah. The men's communities, the old men's groups that have all mostly been pulled apart now because they're sexist, so you're not allowed to have them. I think there was real value there in men being able to come together and I think it's because a lot of them were able to earn a level of respect in those groups. We've got a few people in the comments who I think are disagreeing with us here. So let's jump straight into
just a little.
Have you been watching this? All right.
Yeah.
We've got I think there's a few here. I think this is directed at me. Fluent false dichotomy. It'd be good if we could actually bring this. It's an hour 20. It's probably too late to start sending people invites to jump in here. But we've got the critique as best I can understand it. So space YouTube, if you're there, feel free to clarify if you want. I don't think I'd mentioned capitalism at all here as a synonym for human nature. I'm talking about human nature as I understand human nature. Capitalism is a very different conversation. Capitalism is a construct, well, if you like. I mean, it's the concept of voluntary trade between consenting adults. But sure, I guess you could say voluntary trade between consenting adults is a construct designed to maintain power. Okay, this is a very Marxist critique, right? I think it is possible that voluntary, consenting adults could voluntarily exchange things without it being a power relationship. Although, having said that, I do admit that a lot of capitalists, people like you and I, Gene, often underestimate the role of power dynamics in social interactions. So we note that a voluntary trade could be mutually beneficial to the people involved. True, that's the thing that Marxists don't seem to understand. But there are also a lot of human interactions that have this subtext, unstated or sometimes unseen, just below the surface of this power imbalance or power dynamic. And often the person who has the thing the other person wants the most has the most power, and they're able to exploit that. So there's truth to that. I don't think how any of that contradicts anything I'd said in today's chat, though. Maintain power and wealth. I guess everyone would probably like to maintain power and wealth, but I don't see how voluntary trade does that. I think you're far more likely to see lobbying the government to ban other people competing with you is a much better way to maintain power and wealth. But of course, everyone who hates capitalism wants a really big government, which is exactly the group of people that end up maintaining power and wealth for the people who lobby them. But you're the one that trusts them, Space. You trust these politicians, and then oh wait, I can imagine the response. No, I just trust the good politicians. All right, good stuff, Space. Well done. So I don't know if he, I assume it's a she, given the nature of these arguments. So has come back and responded. I think this was responding to what we said before about the men's clubs being a space for men to be able to get meaning in their life. Clubs are about reinforcing dogma and societal roles. Yes, so I guess this is the idea that the difference between men and women is a societal construct, which probably is that topic is too big for us to start at an hour and a half into the show. But suffice to say, it's utter bullshit that the difference between men and women is socially constructed. There are differences. Unless you think, I don't know, and some people think this, you talk about young earth creationists, there are people that actually think the world was created like 50 years ago and everything before that is an implanted memory. Perhaps Space is one of those people that thinks the whole world was created 50 years ago and everything else is an implanted memory. But if you actually do believe in evolution, Space, men and women have co-evolved next to each other to be complementary and different for a long time. And the idea that every difference is socially constructed is I think the technical term for that is retarded. Anyway, having had a bit of fun there, I think there was someone else who was men's sheds. There we go. We talked about this, right? Men's sheds, male spaces have been dismantled by feminists for decades. So I think they disagree with us.
Mm.
Does that mean I can't work out what they're saying then. Men's sheds and male spaces have been dismantled by feminists for decades. I feel like we said that. I guess we said it the wrong way, Gene. I'm very disappointed in you.
Yes. Yeah. I might have been, maybe they think I'm naive or thinking that we can, there are these clubs out there that we can go to where we can have those. Go ahead.
What do you think? Definitely a woman.
I'm not commenting. Not commenting. We're going to talk about the topic we put on the.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm in the comments. Everyone else, tell me if I'm wrong.
We still need to talk about your what is it? CANZUK? What is that abbreviation? Canada.
CANZUK.
CANZUK. Yes.
It is a terrible abbreviation. Look, that's another thing I'd like to ask anybody at home for a better name for this. Now, of course, it's not up to me, but I would like to see a better potential name for this. So this was the topic of the newsletter that went out today. And if you're not getting it already, go to Oz Taxpayers, austaxpayers.substack.com. You get one email a week, so we don't spam you. And the topic, it comes out early on Thursdays, and then we often talk about it on Thursday nights. And the topic this week was CANZUK. This is the idea of an alliance between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And you take the C from Canada, A from Australia, NZ from NZ, and UK from UK, put it together, and you get a really clunky, hard to say acronym. So if you've got a better one, please throw it at the wall. The world needs a better one. But the idea here is, and the way I framed it in the newsletter, is so often issues of international affairs, right? Immigration, a big one. We dived into that last week, but also trade. These are often done through a binary lens of, do you want more immigration or less? And that is a good question, but it's not the only one. Do you want more trade, international trade, or less? Good question, but it's not the only one. And I guess what we're talking about here is the other question is not just more or less, but with who, right? And I think it's a big underappreciated part of the discussion. And that's where ideas like CANZUK comes in and says, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we, as I said at the beginning of that article, I think it's called, was it globalization? Neither globalization nor protectionism, right? Yet there is a way where you can embrace internationalism with some countries and hold off a bit more or remain a bit more skeptical or protectionist with other countries. That is another sort of third way path through this international dilemma. And this idea is, I've split it, and I'm not the first one to do this, in sort of the immigration, economic, and geopolitical consequences. One idea would be easier movement of people between Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the first thing to note here, quite important, this already exists for Australia and New Zealand, right? So basically this idea, the CANZUK idea, is saying, let's take the nature of the relationship that exists with Australia and New Zealand and expand it to the next two countries that we consider to be most culturally compatible. Because Australia and New Zealand, very similar countries. People who are traveling, when they're coming through Australia and they say, what's New Zealand like? I say, it's very similar to Australia, but it's colder, the people are nicer. That's about it. Sorry, Australians, but and greener. Colder, greener, and the people are nicer. But I don't like the cold, so I'm staying here. So they're very similar countries, but the Canucks in the UK, very culturally compatible. So expanding this relationship we have with New Zealand to these two extra countries. And that would mean there are some extra Canucks and Poms, although there's already plenty of Poms here. I don't know if it would make too much difference. And it would make it a bit easier for us to spend time in Canadian land and the UK. So that's the immigration side. And you can immediately imagine the people watching this at home throwing tomatoes at their screen going, no, I've been telling you, I don't want more immigrants. I'll just point out, this idea could be done with more immigrants, or it could be done with less immigrants. This is an idea of where we're looking in the world, not the total amount. So there's two topics, right? Total amount and then where, right? And so you could be extremely pro-immigration and still embrace something like CANZUK, and you could be extremely anti-immigration and still embrace something like CANZUK. So there are two topics to be had separately, and today I'm not trying to have the topic about total immigration numbers. Have that discussion. We had it a bit last week. But here I'm asking you to look at, with migration flows, as we discussed last week, there is a cultural element. Could it be perhaps that we could sustain migrants a little bit easier if they were already quite culturally compatible? Maybe these would be immigrants that are relatively easier to integrate into our pre-existing society. So maybe we can be a little bit less scared when a Kiwi comes over. I mean, I know they're still a dirty Kiwi, but perhaps they're a little bit less scary and we could probably integrate them. Now we still got the housing problem, but maybe that's why you want to get the numbers down. That's a different part of the conversation. So anyway, that's the immigration side. Should we be biased towards these CANZUK countries? And this idea, the idea of a CANZUK alliance, is saying, yes, let's make it so that we're already biased towards New Zealand. That already exists, right? That's not a theory. Should
closer
we
economic relations? Yeah.
Yes, that's what the deal's called, CER. And the next part of it is economic, so closer economic relations. We already have pretty close economic relations, but it could be improved. And Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada, he's the person that's been talking about this idea lately and put this idea back in the news, which is the reason I'm talking about it. And this is one of the issues he stresses. You could have mutual recognitions of qualifications, of standards, and that would basically decrease the regulatory burden and just make it easier for these countries to interact, operate interchangeably. So that would be economic advantages from that and sort of gains from trade and economies of scale. But a big part of this as well is there are a lot of people out there, and we need to bring Dan Ryan on here someday, who are increasingly skeptical of some of our trade relationships, right? And they're worried, I think, with some justification. They are worried that we are becoming over-reliant on some countries that may not be reliable. Now, often they're thinking about China. You could make a case that the US could fall into that basket. But whoever you're thinking of, there are countries out there that maybe we feel like we are overexposed to. And so the argument here is not just you could get economic gains from the sort of trade and investment and interactions with the CANZUK countries, but increasing our interactions with those countries might make us less reliable on other countries which we have less faith in long term. So there is that element of the trade puzzle. So again, this isn't just saying more trade, more trade. You could even have less trade, but have less trade in total. I don't think you should, by the way, but if you disagree with me on trade, you could have less trade in total, but have more trade with the CANZUK countries. So again, there's this different issue. How much do you want? One debate to be had, second debate, and with who? And the argument here is that there are benefits with the CANZUK countries, similar GDP, similar wage levels, similar unemployment, similar inflation, similar parliamentary democracy systems, similar legal system, similar history, similar language, similar culture, similar sort of high trust, high income society, similar everything, similar labor markets. So it just makes them quite interchangeable in a way that maybe not every country is. And the last point here, which is less relevant for your day-to-day life, but it's still worth noting, is the geopolitical part of the puzzle. Australia and Canada, and arguably now even the UK, are mid-tier powers. The major powers being the US, obviously, China, arguably the EU, depending on whether you treat them as one and take them seriously, and increasingly India, which has recently overtaken Japan to be the fourth biggest economy in the world. And then Japan, if you want to, potentially, but they don't have a great military at the moment. But anyway, those are the top tier powers. Australia, Canada, mid-tier. UK has fallen from top to mid. This would put CANZUK in that top tier, right? So you'd have the US, the EU, China, and us. And CANZUK would be sort of roughly twice the size, not quite twice the size of the economy of India. Or nearly the size of India and Japan combined. I mean, that is a significant economy. It's getting close to the size of actually, I can't remember which one it's getting close to. So I'll just say it's big, right? It becomes a big player on a geopolitical stage, harder to push around, a significant military player, a significant diplomatic player, and a significant cultural player on the world stage. So those are the various arguments. Now, there are very good rebuttals or concerns people would have about how you would exactly make it work. We don't have all the answers for that on this short live stream, but the fundamental idea is one that I think is interesting enough to at least be discussed, right, to explore. And so I put it to you, dear listener, dear reader. What do you think about the idea? What would the problems be? Are they solvable? Would it only be achievable if the countries were led by the right people? What sort of institutional guardrails would need to be put in place? Or do you think it's those are the wrong countries for us to be associated with? And so that's another thing. You could suggest a similar sort of close alliance with other countries, but I'm not sure you'd find other countries that share as much sort of history, culture, institutions, and interests as those four. But anyway, that is the idea of CANZUK. Gene, tell me where the idea is right and wrong.
Well, I like the concept. I mean, I think closer relations with those countries sounds great. The issue is, and I think this has been raised in I've seen some criticisms of your Substack post where they say, well, hang on, hasn't the UK, aren't there concerns about the level of immigration in the UK and concerns about social cohesion in the UK? And is there therefore a risk that if we open up more to the UK with migration from the UK, make that easier, we could end up importing some of the problems that they have in the UK over to here?
Yeah, I think that is basically the issue I had in mind when I said you can see wrinkles in the idea. And when
Yes.
I was asking for potential institutional guardrails, I would suggest, and I think I saw the comment on Substack and I responded to it. So everyone, Oz taxpayers, AUS taxpayers.substack.com. Go and check out the article if you haven't seen it. Join the conversation. It's free to join. Please sign up. You can basically also sign up to on a paid version, which helps us to keep the lights on, but you can access everything on the free version. So if you don't want to give us money, still follow along so you can get involved in the conversation. And you'll see there that comment that Gene mentioned and my response at the time that I think to be made to work, you would probably need the institutional guardrails of these countries guaranteeing preventions against future mass migration of flooding in and fundamentally changing the nature of the country, creating ways of backdoor immigrants effectively. Now, that's not a particularly satisfying answer for the people that are already in the country. So that could be an issue if you think that the UK is already gone. I remain hopeful that if we can fix the way we're doing immigration, that countries like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and America for that matter, will be able to reestablish sort of an internal social cohesion if it's given enough time to settle. So I remain hopeful of that. I guess if you think the UK is already just a future caliphate in waiting, maybe you wouldn't want the UK to be in the alliance. I can see that concern. So these are the sort of discussions that would need to be had. These are the sort of flies in the ointment or the topics that would need to be worked out. I don't pretend I have all the answers. I don't pretend I'm not even necessarily saying it would be an achievable idea in the end. But I think it is the sort of idea that helps us bypass some of the old just yes, no binary, more trade, less trade, more people, less people. It's potentially a circuit breaker to that could help us to get the gains of trade. So I'll say that we've talked about trade before, and I know some of our audience has become more skeptical of trade than we are over time. And some of the people on the right have become more skeptical of trade. A lot of our well-being now comes from the fact that we are a part of integrated trade networks. Now, the case is overstated, right? Some of the sort of globalist or globalization zealots sort of make the claim that you have to have complete free trade, complete capital mobility, complete people movement, and that's how you get wealthy. That's not true. But if you have none of it, you are screwed. Right, so we do need to find a way to still access the gains from trade that help maintain our lifestyle. And you want to do it by allowing yourself to wind back the parts of globalism that you think are dangerous. But if you wind them all back, we're screwed, right? We become quite poor quite quickly, and that does not do good for social cohesion, right? I mean, that a lot of things decay quickly when people find themselves out of jobs and shrinking incomes and can't afford houses and can't afford their families. That is not a good outcome. So we need to find a way to address the concerns people have about elements of globalism while holding on to the core benefits we get from being integrated into trading networks. And perhaps things like CANZUK allow us to get some of those all-important gains from trade, and perhaps then decrease our reliance on other countries that maybe you want less reliance on. So I take the criticism, I take the point. I don't have all the answers, but I think it's an idea worth pursuing, because we have to look for new ideas in this current political moment. And that is one.
What inspired this, John? Were you inspired by Mark Carney's visit to Australia? Because I mean, Mark Carney's he's a bit of a star globally now, isn't he? I mean, he's seen as the adult in the room, really, isn't he? Is that what inspired you to write that post?
No, interestingly enough, his opponent. Although it's very good that Carney was here, because they seem to be on similar tracks. But Carney is the leader of the lefty group in Canada and the current Prime Minister of Canada. His opponent, his opposition, is the Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre, probably mispronouncing his French surname. So apologies, Pierre. But Pierre is in the UK at the moment on a speaking tour. He gave, I think, the Margaret Thatcher lecture to a group of UK conservatives. And his the theme of his last couple of speeches has been re-energizing the idea of CANZUK. Like literally, he's been talking about CANZUK idea. And it was him talking about that reminded me that ATA has talked about it before. So if he was talking about it, we could be talking about it and get the idea back on the agenda. And look, I think it's an idea that's worthy of discussion, right? And this is how you push forward ideas, right? You put them on the agenda, get people talking. It doesn't all get done in one day, but that's the only way ideas progress.
And what excites them? Is there something that excites him about Australia, or is it just that we're an Anglophone country? Like, is there something? Does he look to Australia and think we're actually doing some things right, and he wants to partner with us or learn from us?
Well, the CANZUK idea existed before Pierre Poilievre picked it up, right? So he's picked up an idea and run with it. The CANZUK idea has been floated around for a few years now. So he was in the UK. Most of his speech was giving examples about the UK, right? So if if some sort of licensing system was good enough for London, England, it would be good enough for London, Ontario, Canada. There's a London in Canada as well, in case you didn't know. So that this was the sort of the arguments he was making. But yeah, so I don't think he was like picking Australia out of a hat. This is an idea that had been established. And I think when this idea came about, it was people who were looking for which group of people. I think part of this is motivated by geopolitics. Which other people out there are so culturally similar to us that if we sort of bonded together, it would be quite easy to make like an economics fit and the culture fit. And then we'd be able to come together with very similar ideas and not be pushed around on global diplomacy as much as we are when we are small or mid-tier players.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of the motivation. And when you look around for similar countries, which other countries can we say we share a language, a history, a legal system, a political system, lots of sort of cultural artifacts of and values, and a high income, high trust society? I mean, all those four countries have a lot of overlap, right? It's rare to find countries with as much overlap as those four countries have.
Yeah. So why aren't we including the United States? So is this a critique of the US, or is this just the recognition that the US is the global, imperial power, or it's the superpower, and so there's no point. I mean, we need to have a group so we can talk collectively. We've got the ability to engage as a peer with the US. Is that the idea?
Well, I don't want to spend too much time getting into the heads of the people who came up with this idea, because the idea's been around for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years.
Okay.
I wasn't there when they came up with it. I just read their stuff, found it convincing. But like, I imagine part of the answer is the US would have no incentive to join such a group. And if we did come together, it would just be the US and people who obey the US. So that's a very different dynamic to creating this as its own standalone group that takes mid-tier countries and allows them to operate in the top tier of geopolitics. US is already in the top tier of geopolitics. The US already has a huge amount of trade just internally. Right? They're actually less reliant on trade because there's already so much trade between, Seattle and Los Angeles and Miami and New York. Right? I mean, that sort of trade still gets you the gains from trade. Right? You don't have to trade with a foreigner to get gains from trade. You just have to trade with someone who's different to you to get gains from trade. And America already has, 370 million people who are different to each other. Whereas the total population of CANZUK would, I think, still be in the low hundreds. So it's I'm not sure adding the US would have achieved any of the extra benefits needed, and they would have just ended up swamping the other four. But I mean, I'm trying to guess what's in the head of the people who came up with the idea. They came up with the idea, they put it down. I think it has legs. I don't think the US would have any incentive to join, whereas I think all four other countries do have some incentive to join this. So it also just makes it more politically achievable. Well, with that said, should we now at 1 hour 45 try to quickly run through some more of the comments?
I think so, John. Yeah, we got some spicy ones tonight.
There's a lot more that have come in since I've started. Okay, shall we quickly go back to the? I know. Should we start at the end, because if it's spicy and relevant to what we're saying now, well, let me know if you can find them then, because I'm just. Well, let me know if you can find the next spicy one then.
There's quite a few. I'm just not sure. Yeah. Okay. When you discuss,
you talk about, so this was going back to the back and forth I had with Space before, and you discuss workplace hierarchy. You're talking about capitalism. Well, this is the Marxist idea that capitalism just means, hierarchy in any place. So look, Sean, if someone has defined things in a Marxist way, I'm probably not going to be able to get you to think of it in another way. But look, if for you then to be able to have a conversation, I just have to do a find and replace on a bunch of words and meanings to be able to make progress. So, and nobody who supports capitalism thinks of capitalism the same way you're talking about. Hierarchy, I would argue, just inevitably exists anywhere where a group of people get together and need to achieve a task. I mean, soccer clubs have a captain. I mean, you spend enough time going on a bushwalk, you're going to end up following someone. If one person's been there before, you're going to ask them for directions. Nearly anywhere humans get together and interact and coordinate to achieve a goal, you will end up having a natural hierarchy form. I think the relevant feature for my mind isn't the existence of hierarchy, is that hierarchy based on competence, in which case the hierarchy actually helps everyone involved, or is it based on nepotism, corruption, or the fact that there is a political actor that can just ban people? Because when political actors get involved, it's no longer just voluntary exchange between consenting adults. It's whoever obeys the bureaucrat gets to stay in business. But yeah, so hierarchy is everywhere. So this the idea that, if I'm talking about hierarchy in business, find me a business that doesn't have a hierarchy. Find me a union that doesn't have a hierarchy. Find me a socialist commune or Israeli kibbutz. Find me any situation in the Spanish anarchist experiments that didn't end up with a hierarchy. They literally every communist situation ever, every anarchist experiment, every utopian experiment have all ended up with a hierarchy, because that's just naturally the way humans will coordinate. Someone's going to ask the competent person, how did you do that? So yeah, but I don't know if we want to dive too much into Marxism in this conversation. I don't know who that's to. That might have been in response to us trying to understand. She was the person who was annoyed at us. I don't know if she explained it again later. Yep. Men's sheds are no longer men only. I'm not sure if she ends up disagreeing or agreeing with us. Well, she certainly disagrees with Space. All right. Okay. All right. So it was a spiciness going on between other people then. Go on, Gene, help me out if you found any of the good stuff here.
Well, there's just comments I can't fully understand. Things like
no, Space. I'm a man. But thank you for inquiring. I noticed you didn't answer. Is that because we all actually know? And the fact that we could all tell makes you cringe so hard, because you realize there must be truth to the fact that we can tell.
I think someone pushed back on you calling Mark Carney a leftist. They said he's neoliberal. think I saw that in the
okay, but they don't mean a John Howard neoliberal though, because Carney comes from there's a centre right and a centre left party in Canada, and he's the prime minister representing the centre left party. So maybe they might be saying, I don't know if this is a person who's grew up on American politics, but they may be drawing the distinction between a lefty and a liberal, which some Americans like to do these days.
Gee, I think they're.
We don't need more British YouTubers. Look, I agree with that, although we already get their YouTube material, right? So we're not being out there. YouTube isn't blocked. Maybe that's what we need, right? Just to block YouTube.
We've been accused of racist white supremacism, which I completely reject. I do not agree.
John and Gina, funny the way they're trying to tiptoe around their racist white supremacist ideology. I didn't know there was much tiptoeing there. Just diving straight in. Oh, poor old Gina. No, this is not being. We've discussed this before. I don't think it's the genetics that matter. Look, but also the idea that you can just shut down conversations by shouting the word racist now is kind of fake and gay, and I'm not really interested in it. So, look, you get as offended as you like. I encourage you to be offended. I hope you're offended. Embrace the offense. The truth is, I think culture matters and genetics don't. But I also just don't give a shit if someone's going to start accusing people of racism these days. It's a meaningless jibe. You have inflated that word to the point where it has lost its value, which was a stupid thing to do because there are real racists out there. But for some reason, you don't seem to care about that because you want to try and win an argument online. So good stuff. All right, so maybe we should go back to the earlier stuff then. You can have a look to see if the later comments are spicy. Islam is completely incompatible with the West, completely. I think that any country has the capacity to integrate very different people as long as it happens slowly enough. So I can understand your instinct and where you're coming from, and I think there's a way to see some from a certain angle. There's some truth to that, but I don't want to. Only a Sith thinks in absolutes. So like there's
very good reference, John. Very good. Love it.
There's some very good individual Muslim people in the country, and if the rate of people coming to the country or the size of that community didn't just sort of grow exponentially, I don't think it would be a threat. The threat to my mind comes from the rate of growth and the lack of integration. But I'm probably just now I'm probably just going to be copping hate on both sides. So this is a good point. Although China, I think, has been unreliable when they disagreed with us about COVID and they chucked on a bunch of tariffs and quotas and sort of blocked taking in our, I think, the wheat and our wine exports. But it's a pretty good case. This is why I sort of mentioned it in passing. It's not like America has been a particularly reliable trade partner in recent years. Look, I think Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney have both made reference to that. That the nature of the behavior of the US in recent years has increased the incentive for countries like Canada and Australia to pursue closer economic relations, which makes some sense. Now we're getting really into the weeds. Iranians are Aryans, indeed, potentially the originals. But that's probably not what anyone means these days. Right? I think people get so distracted by some of this crossover between history and genetics. And I don't think that's really what anyone is worried about when they talk about immigration. I really do think that what vexes people is culture. And they end up getting caught up in links between how does this culture tie to a history or a religion or genetics. And sometimes there's links and sometimes there's not. But I hope those connections don't take people down the garden path to focus on the part that isn't the crucial part. To my mind, the cultural compatibility is the crucial part. Fixating on the history or the genetics, I think, is unhelpful. I don't think it's accurate, but I also don't think it's helpful. So, no, you didn't stutter. I heard you. All right. I think these people are mostly fighting with each other here, Gene, which does look like fun, but maybe we should. Today is
Yeah, I
brought to
think it
you by.
might be time to wrap up. I mean, we did cop a bit of criticism. Okay.
Well, if you bring it up if you like.
Well, look, I completely yeah. So
it's because they're willing to accept a certain number of black people who have accepted Anglo-Protestant ideology. Yeah, well, that's look. I would encourage Eugene to take my attitude now. There is a certain cohort of people, they're nearly never honest actors, because if you actually tell them what you think, they'll say, no, what you secretly mean is this, which is clearly just a dishonest actor. And then they use the slur racist to try to stop a conversation, often when they know they're losing the argument, right? So you don't need to take them seriously. Like by writing this sort of stuff, Davison Neal, whoever it is basically just saying, I'm losing the argument. I'm falling back on a slur. Help me. Right. So feel free to put it up. I mean, firstly, if you're taking in people who are black because they accept your culture, that's culturalist, not racist. Right. And I admit to being a culturalist. Hell, I admit to being a sexist.
Yeah. I mean, I
don't think the genetics matters. I think the culture does. So,
I mean, certainly it's part of the criteria for immigrating to Australia that you need to abide by our laws and accept our values. I think you even have to commit to that in your citizenship oath. So I completely reject the idea that we're white supremacist. I don't believe that at all, and I'm not even Protestant, so I'm Catholic. So
that's it. Kick him out. No, you've got to draw a line here. Come on, Gene. You didn't tell me that. So there's people here saying that, was it? Do you think Australia was here when Captain Cook arrived? Yes. Some people are saying that Australia existed before Australia was created, which obviously isn't true. Right? So Australia was created. These history debates, look, they're interesting and they're fun, but by the time you're having it on the internet late at night with a beer in hand, very few people are in it for the honest pursuit of truth. They're more in it for ripping down, I won the internet. And not having a go at you here, Naughty. I mean, it seems like what a lot of people are doing in this back and forth. But the history was, in the sober light of day, people should go and read some proper history. Listen to John Ruddock's history, The Political History of Australia. That's a great introduction to understanding the early political history of Australia. But I don't think it's core to the issue we're talking about here. The issue we're talking about, and people can agree or disagree with this, is there value in having closer ties with countries that have a lot of cultural and economic overlap with us. And you don't have to agree with that. I mean, there's an economic case to be made that you should trade with countries that are very different to you as well. Sure, you can make that case. You can go back and forth, or you could just sit there and shout racist, like kind of a stuttering retard. But yeah, your choice, your choice. Didn't get any better than that? That's the point about... Yeah, okay. I didn't mean he's a socialist, right? So if you do come from a Marxist background, I could see why that would be your critique, and it makes sense from where you're coming from. I just meant that he represents the centre-left party in Canada. But no, he's definitely not a Marxist. I'll give you that. All right, let's just go quickly back to, I think this is all just Davison sort of spazzing out mostly. So there was a few comments early on that I think got short shrift because we just wanted to see the fight at the end. So I'll just get to them really quickly. Lyndon, who shows up loyally every week, asks, can you comment on the IMF warnings about Victorian debt levels? I haven't seen them lately. Gene, did you?
Yeah, so I've seen that. That was in the Article 4 report that came out a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I think it was a concern over debt at across state governments in Australia, not just Victoria. I mean, Victoria's leading the pack, but I mean, New South Wales has got high debt. Queensland is catching up to them. So yeah, it's all state governments, and then there's that concern about what that means for the federal government, whether they may have to bail them out at some stage. So yes, yeah, I did see it. And I agree, it's a risk. Those state governments have to get their budgets in order. They need to, just stop the spendathon. There's no doubt about that. So, yep, saw it and totally agree with it.
I don't think they will, though. I think they're just going to end up getting bailed out. I think we're going to have federal bailouts. I think it's going to be a part during our life as before we retire, Gene. I think it's going to become a normal part of Australian politics. This decade, which stage is the federal government having to bail out? Are they going to impose like IMF conditions when they bail out the state?
Well, they should.
It's probably going to totally undermine our competitive federalism. I mean, they just shouldn't bail them out, in my opinion. But I
agree. Yeah.
And then once they bail them out, they're going to start taking control of their decisions, and it's not a pretty outcome. But this is my prediction for the night that is going to happen. A couple of comments here related to when we were talking about the war. Taylor P. think the US will keep going until there's a somewhat controllable leader in Iran. I think they will keep going until Trump feels the political consequences become intolerable. And then no matter what the situation is on the ground, he will declare it a victory. That's my prediction. And it may be a victory by then. But if the politics gets away from him and there isn't a victory, then I suspect he will still just declare it a victory, because that seems like what you would do in that situation if you were a political hack with no scruples. All right. Has Albanese made any statements? I think Australia's just vaguely said, yeah, we like America, and then tried to say nothing else. They've tried to be as silent as possible after saying, yeah, go America, then keep their head down and hope no one asks them a follow-up question.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell. We don't have bases for them to borrow, right? That's the reason Starmer got in trouble, is he got in this whole debate back and forth about which British bases the Americans could use to launch attacks. And he said yes to some and no to some, and some for offensive and some for defensive, and that's what got him all caught up. Interestingly, the two right-wing parties in the UK disagree vehemently on this issue, with Nigel Farage's Reform UK saying rah, rah, all in with the US, and the other guy, Rupert Lowe's, was it Restore Britain, saying, no, not another regime change war. Let's just focus on fixing Britain and stop getting caught up in entangling wars overseas. So that's a very interesting contrast on the right of politics in the UK.
So John, just for clarity, I mean, you're talking about military bases, but we have one of the most important spy bases in the world in the Australian outback. I mean, there's no doubt that Pine Gap is playing a role in this war, isn't it? I mean, with all the signals intelligence and the communications. So there's no doubt that we're involved in it somehow. And every conflict the United States is involved in, we're involved to some extent. I think, aren't we talking about possibly loaning or providing some equipment for to the US? I think I saw some news about that today. That's a possibility. So look, I mean, we're involved in one way or another. Maybe not to the same extent as we were in Iraq, but we're definitely going to be involved to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that what we're going to be loaning them. It seems that most of the action there is using military hardware that we don't have. So I'm not sure what we're going to loan. I mean, normally we send over like a company of SAS soldiers because they're pretty well trained and good sorts. And then that's only 100 people, and then we can say we've done something. But I don't think we're even doing that at the moment because there's no boots on the ground yet.
Looks like we've sent military planes to the Middle East.
To pick up
people. That's a contingency plan. Yeah, you're right. So that's for the repatriation. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I think that's what I was looking at. Yeah.
But the interesting part will come if America insists there must be regime change and the Iranian government refuses to buckle or surrender. If they really insist on regime change, then they're going to have to go in with some troops on the ground. At that point, they'll ask for our assistance. Yeah. And at that point, we should say no, I very strongly believe. But there will be very high pressure to say yes, and I suspect both major parties would say yes. And I think one nation will probably say yes too. So I think we'd just be left with maybe Ralph Babette as the Rupert Lowe of Australia, the last person left standing, saying no. So onto our planning discussion from Taylor P. Do you think this planning argument is a guise to allow poorer conditions? It's not a guise, but I think they should be allowed to have poorer conditions. I mean, when I first got into the housing market, I bought a place that wouldn't be allowed to be built today. I was perfectly happy living in it. I mean, I'd never lived in a place that I owned before. I was very proud and chuffed as a young man to be living in a really shitty 2-bedroom apartment in the middle of nowhere. But, and so, yeah, it wouldn't have passed every sort of condition of a modern building site today, but that's because it was built a bit cheaper. And at some stage, we need to decide, do we actually want cheap housing, or do we just want to pretend we want cheap housing and then insist that we want perfect standards? Life is about trade-offs. Everything is a trade-off. There is no just utopia button you can press and get everything.
Yeah.
Unlike what our Marxist friends might tell us. So I'll look out for the comment below. Special economic zones, there's some legs to this idea, I think. The trick is, with special economic zones, is a lot of the taxes you'd want to avoid are federal. There's the difficult interaction between state and federal government, right? So a lot of the regulations are states, a lot of the taxes you want to avoid are federal. But yeah, it's something that could be looked into. Or Kevin Rudd looked into it in the Northern Territory, which is one place where the federal government could do it on their own because it's not a state. He was talking about that in the lead up to the 2013 election, which he then lost, and so it never came to fruition. But that's one place where you could look at it. What else have we got here? But the 77 pay gap, sob, it's real. Yes. So I think I've just about got through the backlog here. And well, this is a part of the trick. Get together with families. This is going back to the other issue before of the social isolation people have. Get together in family and community networks. So one of the best decisions we made as a family was to homeschool our kids and connect with the homeschooling community. Great community, great sort of people. And there's lots of different communities. So if you don't like one, go find another one. And that has really good interaction and gives everyone a sense of purpose and value. But if you're not into that, find another one. But yeah. And we found we don't have to have exactly the same opinions on everything, as long as we have broadly, directionally, some shared values and an open mind to have fun arguments. That's all of the ones I'd saved from before. I was just check the very end to see if anything really spicy has come at the end. I see that people just arguing with each other now. This is glorious. Anna's back. I don't know what else Anna's been saying, but I'll just give some love to the Irish. I think this is just gone into a full-on. What is that? Well, that's a big discussion for another day. Depends what honest. The British state is the enemy? Oh my God, this is going everywhere. This is glorious. I think we're going to have to shut this down just so that I have the time to go and read this chat myself. But of course, if we shut it down, I can't actually join the chat anymore. So did you find anything?
John, I think I'm going to have to sign off.
Oh, that's very appropriate that I put this up. You're running for cover, Gene. You're running. You're clearly scared of this sort of incompetent retard called Davis. It's you're running for. I know, he must have said something else. What did he say earlier? Did he say something incisive and witty? I'm trying to find out. Why should anyone adhere to Anglo-Protestant ideology? Well, Australia's only existed as a concept for 250 years and as a country for about 130. So, but it's existed as a continent for a long time, that's for sure. I'm not really sure what the relevance of that is. I mean, as is the current political entity, the political entity that we're talking about now, that is Australia, really only started. Well, it really only came to fruition about 100 years ago, was it? Some would argue even after federation, as an independent political concept. So, and why should you adhere to Anglo-Protestant ideology? Well, it's not even just Anglo-Protestant ideology. I would make it more specific to, I think we've had some degree of building an Australian culture now. It's an Australian culture, not an ideology. I mean, there's been plenty of people who share an Australian culture with me who I disagree with on ideology. I mean, there's plenty of disagreements inside cultures. I think that's a bit of a false analogy there. Oh, copping a bit of hate here for you here, Gene. Catholicism is pagan sun worship. It has nothing to do with Christianity. Oh, look, this chat is far more interesting than us. I mean, everyone go to YouTube when this is on next time and just follow this YouTube back and forth. But I think probably, sorry, Gene?
Well, I thought what you were saying, I can't understand why this has triggered so much, so many negative comments or hate watching. Anyway, I thought what you were saying was, okay, that's an interesting proposition to consider. Let's talk about it. But yeah, you've obviously upset a lot of people, John. So anyway.
It's a good Thursday night then. It's a good Thursday night. And you've offended people by saying you're Catholic. So that's
right.
Beautiful as well.
Okay. Well, this is why the whole
got called racist when he was saying we should reduce immigration numbers. Yes, everyone gets called racist now. That's what I say. Stop taking it seriously, right? It's not a real thing, right? This is the last hurrah of incontinent, incompetent retards just sort of shrieking to themselves, hoping anyone cares. So just stop caring, and they sort of go away. They stop really existing. Davis is a makes us. No, look, this is the pretense of sophistication, right? I have some whiskey snob friends who would be able to do a very good version of that. Look, Tofu would be able to do a decent version of it. But I actually have a friend who travels the world as a whiskey taster, basically, a whiskey snob. They get paid to be a whiskey snob traveling the world, which is a nice job if you can get it. It wouldn't work for me because despite the fact that I like whiskey, I'm also pretty much a sort of a bogan and with beer and low standards kind of guy as well. So I don't have the sophisticated palate necessary to.
But as they say on the Whiskey Tribe channel, John, the best whiskey is the whiskey you like to drink the way you like to drink it. So it's
that sounds too hippie for me. That sounds too hippie. That sounds too much like sort of Davis O'Neill feminism. So that sounds like the power of male feminism. Hey, Davis.
John, I think we're gonna. I have to sign off soon. I think. The chat went out of control tonight. It's great to get all this interaction. But, yeah.
Well, I've just got to bring up the comment then. If we're about to leave, we've got to have. I've lost it now. All right, there we go. Go on, Gene. Run for cover. You can't handle the wit and intelligence and sophistication and the power of the male feminist. All right, so right. Having said all that, it is 2:12. The last thing we do before we go, Gene, I always throw it to you. Any last comments, any thoughts for the day after that long and fun episode?
John, no, I found it a good conversation. You've given me a lot to think about with Iran. I'm probably less anxious about it after having spoken with you and got your perspective on it. So I'm pleased about that. It's dawning upon me just how fraught these issues to do with immigration are, and just how much discussion we end up having. And it's such a volatile topic, isn't it? Where we need to get to a point where we can have a discussion in a rational way and come up with a policy that makes sense, that is in the national interest, that maximizes the well-being of Australians. So that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, well, this is, as I said yesterday when we had that immigration chat, there is a cultural element that so many people are scared to have because of the possibility of being called racist. And then, of course, the racists jump into the conversation and make it even harder to have the conversation. And look, I think because of the difficulty of having the conversation, we've shied away from it for so long that too many big unanswered questions have just been allowed to sit there below the surface. And we sort of flail around trying to grab onto a topic that will allow us to address this unspoken issue. We're just going to have to learn to speak about the issue. Culture exists. And sort of there is issues of greater and lesser cultural compatibility. And that doesn't mean you hate everybody that's different to you, but you have to be able to talk about the nature of culture. And hopefully we have contributed to that last week and this week. And despite the haters, or indeed because of the haters, because I think it has been glorious fun to watch these retards spaz out, I will keep talking about it. And I hope you at home will join me as we do. This has been a lot of fun, Gene. Thank you. Thank you to everyone listening at home. Thank you for all the comments. Please do check in on our website, taxpayers.org.au. You can see the campaigns we're up to. You can also join if you are so inclined. Now, we provide everything we do, nearly everything we do, open source to the public because we're trying to be involved in the public debate. So putting it behind a firewall would defeat the purpose of that. But we do need to keep the lights on. So if you like what we do and you want to help make sure we can keep doing it, please consider becoming a member. You can do it for quite cheap, a couple of bucks a month. And if you have more money, please consider doing a higher membership level. You can join either on our website, or if you feel like you can do it through Substack, although you have to pay higher fees to the Substack gods. But regardless, please do follow us on Substack as well, Oz Taxpayers, austaxpayers.substack.com, to keep in touch with our newsletter, get involved in the debate and the discussion. We'd love to see you there. We do this live stream every Thursday night, 7:30 Queensland time, 8:30 for you dirty Southerners, and WA can work it out yourself. And we enjoy having you here. Thank you for joining us this week. Hope to see you next week. Until then, stay happy and stay free.